Suppose he had decided when he got to Samarkand that he didn't want to go on a pilgrimage, he wanted to become a merchant, and he wanted to travel further west. What would he do?
I think that the obvious choice would have been he would have talked with the most important merchants of the time, whose homeland, in fact, was in what we now call Samarkand, the Sogdians, a people of Iranian language and origin, whose history can be traced back quite a bit earlier than when he was there, who, as it turns out, were the most important and the most widely traveled merchants of the time and in the preceding and to some extent subsequent centuries along the Silk Roads.
So I know some Sogdians end up in Chang'an,
Yes.
the capital. Do they go all the way west to Byzantium as well?
They do. We even have evidence of Sogdians probably in the Black Sea and the Crimea. We have Sogdians traveling into the Middle East. We have Sogdians in what is now northern Pakistan. We have Sogdians in Southeast Asia.
Wow. Really all over.
They're really all over.
Leaving aside for the moment the fact that no one really had heard about Sogdians, that they sort of disappeared from the landscape, there's something that you showed me from this palace that was discovered in the Samarkand area at this place called Afrasiab.
If you visit Samarkand today, what had been the center of the urban culture in earlier centuries and in the time of the Sogdians is on the outskirts, and it is now a dusty mound, which is continuing to be excavated by the archaeologists. Somewhat by accident, when the Russian scholars and the Central Asian scholars were excavating there back several decades ago, they uncovered a room that probably was the reception hall of somebody really important, perhaps the local ruler, where the lower parts of the walls fortunately survived to this day with the paintings on them. It was all painted with murals. And it basically depicts on the walls of this room the universe of the Sogdians, paintings with different ethnicities, paintings that would connect with India, paintings, of course, specific to the local area and the local ruler, paintings that include images from China. So here, for example, we have an image which shows a portion of this mural as drawn by a modern artist. And circled is a boat with some people in fancy garb, and everybody agrees this is a Tang Chinese princess. And it probably relates to the Spring Festival, one of the spring festivals that were celebrated by the Tang court.
The prow has an animal head on it. She's surrounded by women, serving women or other noble women, except it looks like a man at the back of the boat.
And I think there's some ceremony going on that involves casting things in the water, but it's something that, you know, in the Tang palaces and the gardens where they had the ponds and so on, that this would have been involved as part of the ceremony. And we do know that precisely in this period, when Xuanzang would have passed through, that the Sogdians had negotiated with the Tang about a protectorate. We can look at a drawing from the scene of the reception that occurred when this painting was done, where at least two of the figures with the feathers on their cap have been identified as Koreans.
Koreans?
Yes.
How are they getting there? Why are they there?
Traveled overland. They were maybe part of the military retinue if they have swords on them, or they may have been diplomats. We don't know. Some of the guards of the Sogdian rulers were Turks with their long braids in the back. The Central Asian Turks were particularly important in this period and also had established, at a certain point, established a protectorate over the Sogdians. Sogdians themselves were never very powerful politically or militarily, but they were very good at forging alliances. And they had something to offer, and so they could get protection and support. So this painting then captures a moment when you find east and north and south and west somehow all meet at the court of the Sogdian rulers. One of the pictures actually shows in the procession what we think were probably priests, probably Zoroastrian priests, because they're wearing masks. And of course, the Zoroastrian beliefs included the idea that you should not breathe on the sacred fire, and there were all sorts of protections against contamination. So images that show Zoroastrian priests in masks are a pretty good identifier to know what somebody's religious beliefs were. And you find those also, incidentally, in images on funeral beds in China that were the funeral beds for the Sogdians who went to China and were buried there. If we look at what these Sogdians are wearing, some of these images are really quite vivid because they show embroidered silks, or what we assume are silks. In this case, we see an image with pearl roundels and then some kind of an animal figure inside the pearl roundels. The pearl roundels in this particular design were very popular in the Iranian Middle East, and a lot of these designs can also be found in Chinese silks from China. Sogdians, for example, in the Turfan area, those oasis areas north of the Taklamakan Desert, we have actually documents written in Sogdian so that we know that they were there. They were signing contracts, they were buying and selling, and that kind of thing. And we think that some of them may have been the weavers, who in fact were weaving Sogdian designs into silks locally. Here you can see some of the patterns, actually, that have been drawn by a modern artist based on what's in the paintings in the Sogdian region.
So this is an example, really, of the motifs and patterns that are crossing cultural lines and being adopted.
Here's the Afrasiab painting, so you can see more details. This particular one has a boar's head. And here's a fragment of a mural from in back of those Bamiyan Buddhas and the Buddhist caves in Bamiyan in Afghanistan. Which also show in a pearl roundel a boar's head. So what we have then is this vivid evidence, and of course we could spread it further, and we can go to the Mogao caves at Dunhuang, for example. We can find pearl roundel designs in similar fashion. We find them all over the place, and of course there's some controversy. Where did they come from? But the fact is they spread along the Silk Roads. They're one of the most vivid kinds of evidence.
So in some sense it doesn't matter where they came from. What's really interesting is the fact that they're shared across cultures.
Yes, exactly. The Sogdians then flourished, and then, of course, the Sogdians very quickly disappeared.
Well, before we disappear them,
Okay.
So we stayed at this moment in Samarkand at that palace where we have visual evidence for this intermixing of cultures. Let's keep going west from Samarkand. We're not going to India now. Where are we going?